Welcome to the Opti-Form Podcast. We're really specialized in optimizing fitness performance by bringing on people like this guy, fitness professionals, to really go through workouts, nutrition, supplementation, all that stuff to really help you guys increase your performance at the gym. So today we have Mr. Jason Gonzalez. How's it going, big guy?
Good. How are you doing? Good to be here.
I'm doing good, man. And so, little background on Jason. He is obviously a very good fitness influencer on Instagram. I've been following his stuff. Very good. I like the videos with the also strip of like infographic kind of stuff to like relate it. Not very many people do both of them in the same kind of conjunction. I think it's super helpful because you get a bit like layman's terms, but you also give like the scientific part of it. So then you can kind of start learning in the vocabulary and all that stuff. So, but yeah, so what I first want to do, what we're going to dive in today is more of like strength training, which is his specialty, I believe, along with like functional stuff to really prepare for that strength training and stuff like that. So first off, brother, like who the hell are you? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your story about how you got into fitness.
Yeah, absolutely. So it initially started in high school. I was always that, skinny kid who wanted, didn't like how I looked. And I was like, what can I do to increase my size first and foremost, right? I couldn't get any taller, so I had to get a little bit wider. So
same boat, bro. 5'6" over here.
Yeah, 5'6", same.
I was 145 pounds, man. I was like, shit.
Same. I know. So I weighed about maybe 110, 115. This was like high school, 9th, 10th grade. And I was like, all right, I'm going to start lifting. So started lifting. I took a high school weightlifting class and I was like, all right, a lot of high schoolers really do is bench press. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to crank out this bench press. I'm going to just do it every time I go in there, right? And that'll lead me to where, I initially, in my powerlifting career, that's what I have done. I'm kind of washed out right now, but the bench press is my favorite lift, and I would argue my strongest lift. So I'm not going to attribute it to that, but I'm just saying like it's helped a ton. But anyways, I started in high school, started lifting, got a gym membership, started lifting the gym membership, started eating because at that time I was like, man, I'm just going to pound Big Macs after the gym. Like, like honestly, that's what I did.
Yeah, mine was Caesars.
I'm not saying I'm not like, now I look back at that and I'm like, oh boy, like, I don't know if that was the best idea, but it worked at the time. Mm-hmm. So started lifting and I was like, great, like added on weight, started looking good, feeling better, confidence increased. Everything was really awesome. And then at that time I was, my original path, I was in school, I was going to do nursing and eventually do like anesthesiology, something like that, something in the medical field. But then I was like, wow, I truly love the way that I felt after lifting, and I wanted to influence other people like that. So I was like, okay, let's look into training. So I looked into training, got certified through NASM, which is National Academy of Sports Medicine. And that was 8 years ago. So I've been doing it for 8 years. And I feel like this is something that I'm always hungry for. I'm always thirsty for knowledge in this field. And then with powerlifting, so my fitness background is I did a physique competition, just one. I'm only going to do one also. Yeah. It just wasn't
doing that again. Never starved myself again. Screw that shit.
Yeah. I mean, it just wasn't for me. The look was great. It was awesome. And then I got introduced to powerlifting. That truly, I'm a huge fan of. That's where I started dabbling and learning a ton on strength and how to improve efficiency of the lifts. And then that just was a huge rabbit hole of, technique stuff, pre-ab stuff, like functional stuff, whatever you want to call it. But I powerlifted for 5 years. My last meet was March of 2018, I believe. And I did a bench only meet. And that, I mean, do you know much about powerlifting?
A little bit. What were you? What class? What would you weigh in at?
I was like 143 pounds, so it was the 148 weight class. And my numbers there were squat was 429 or 430. Bench was my highest I hit was 340.
Holy shit.
Yeah, right. So that's what I'm saying is like, I love to bench. I don't know. You just get good at it.
You're putting up more weight than me.
And then deadlift was 460. So again, yeah, I did bench only that last meet. I did have a little complication with a hip issue and low back issue, but all's good now. And then powerlifting, and then now I'm just solely focusing on career stuff, family stuff, and trying to just make a name.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%, man. That's you're doing a good job at it too. So I guess obviously you said 143 weighing in, and you're putting up those numbers for people listening in. It's pretty like mind blowing. In the sense, where'd you do your meet at?
Here in Utah. So they have like more local state meets, and then they have a convention every year called FitCon, which is like more of a, I guess, nationally known meet. And that's where I've done those two.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I'd say that a lot of people think, I believe, at least like in the general, people trying to get into strength training or powerlifting or whatever, they just need to start lifting heavier things, upping the load, lowering the reps. And then honestly, that's it. Like just lifting more volume, maybe, all that kind of stuff. They really dive into that. They don't really dive a lot into nutrition, I bet, like on the beginning side. But today I don't want to talk necessarily about the nutrition, but most of like the common mistakes people make when trying to enter, like maybe they're doing a powerlifting meet, or maybe they're just trying to do for their own goals and break like benching 225. Like if they're at 135, getting to 225 or whatever, and really progressing. What do you think maybe a common mistake people do that you often see?
Yeah. So I think, powerlifting or not, I have never heard of a complaint of someone getting too strong, right? So it's like the general population can get strong. They can set records, whether it's a 1 rep max, 5 rep max, 10 rep max, whatever. Setting a goal is just so empowering, and it just boosts confidence like crazy. I had a client the other day do her first pull-up, and it was like, boom, like the look and like excitement. It was like, wow, like never to do a pull-up in your life and then to do one after the hard work that she's put in. Like it's so awesome. And that's another reason why I love doing this. But anyway, I'd say first and foremost, with anything you're doing, strength training, powerlifting, is like technique and the quality of the rep or the movement should be number one. First and foremost, I like to use or tell my clients that the skill acquisition, so the skill acquisition being how good you can do something, is the primary driver of strength. So you can have shitty movements, shitty lifts, and eventually it's only going to get you so far, right? Or once you get to that distance, something might happen. I don't know what that is, but something might happen, whether that's an injury or whatever. So the better you can develop your skill will set you up for a much better return in the long run, right? So technique, developing the skill is for sure number one. I'd say second going into that is their programming. So definitely their programming, like as a beginner versus an advanced lifter, it's a little bit different. Beginners, they're probably better off. I mean, not better off, but it still works if they go on Google and they're like 5-3-1 program or, 5x5 or whatever, right? Anything that they're going to do initially will be good. However, there is a point of like those beginners can definitely do too much. So I don't know if you know much about like MRV, max recoverable volume, or stuff like that, right? So stuff that goes into bodybuilding as well.
Yeah, I see beginners usually. It's like this is like a breaking point. I see a lot of times when people get into the gym, and that very first week literally is like the fork in the road. Like they go in and they'll like feel, obviously they haven't like lifted and stuff. So when they do, they'll feel great about themselves because they're doing all this stuff. And then like a couple days later, say they hit like legs because they're doing squats. And then they're not ready mentally for that 2 days later shit. You know what I mean? So usually I see a lot of times beginners will do often too much in terms of for recovery and all that kind of stuff, because we were just on another podcast, I forgot who it was with, but like you obviously just trying to stimulate for, in my case, like bodybuilding, it'd be like stimulate muscle growth. You don't need to do 30 sets in that week. You know what I mean? Same thing probably applies for the central nervous system with, powerlifting and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, tracking that volume is in my opinion pretty crucial when it comes to either having a meet coming up in 6 months. Obviously, that's going to differ throughout the cycles that you do. More volume in the beginning, higher intensity at the end, something like that. But yeah, starting out, people either program hop a ton, or they have a generic program. So like I said, generic program does provide value, but I'm always looking at like what's going to be even better for that person, right? So that generic program, so going on Google and typing in whatever, that'll work, but it's going to be much better to allow more individualization, right?
Yeah.
So, the more specific you can get with somebody, the better off they're going to be in the long run, just like their technique, just like their skill, right? So set them up with a good program in the beginning. I would highly recommend, like anybody starting out, to seek out a coach or somebody to at least give them guidance that they trust or other people trust, versus trying to do it on their own. Because just like we are professionals in our industry, I think people should have a little bit more trust in what we have to say, versus them thinking, oh, it's just working out. Like, I think a lot goes into, it's a lot more than, oh, I'm just going to work out. You know what I mean? Like, there is rhyme or reason behind what we do.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, what Jason's saying is an often mistake. People want to get stronger. And I hear this like, hey, man, I just can't get past this plateau. So whatever weight it is, like I've been at it for 3 weeks now. And the first thing I'll ask is usually, do you track what you're doing at all? Usually, oftentimes, it's like as simple as understanding just those basic numbers. Obviously, like if I was in person, like obviously that's not when I'm in person. But if I'm in person, I would look at, especially like on bench and stuff like that. Oftentimes, I see people just protraction happening like crazy, like you're just overextending and just trying to just not correct at all. And so then it's like that form mechanics that you're talking about. And I actually had a similar kind of story with your pull-up girl. I had a guy that's like worked out chest. He said he worked out chest for like 2 years, and he's like never been able to like develop anything. And I was like, in my head, I was like, why'd you wait 2 years to like figure, ask somebody for help? But I showed him just simply how to just bring his scapula a certain way. Obviously, retract his shoulders back and everything like that. And that day, it was like he met Jesus or something. He shook my hand and he almost started crying. I was like, bro, it's like, second nature to us. But at the same time, I think that what you're saying is it's so beneficial, even if you have a trainer at your gym. It's not like you have to go and just like dive into this intense program, but at least start off by asking somebody. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and like you said, like that, sometimes those minor tweaks can actually like somehow just create this crazy efficiency in the lift. And that's when people are like, whoa, like that, it just adds value to know that you know what you're doing and you can set them up better for the future. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And I guess another thing I want to ask you about with like maybe common mistakes is how people will warm up for doing like heavier singles, doubles, triples, or all that kind of stuff, and how they progress themselves to get up to that, whatever you like to do for your one percentage of 1RM or RPE. I don't know how you do it, but how would you say you would go about that?
Yeah, so for me personally, and then I'll tell you kind of how I would give it to a client. But for me personally, I'd start with like something to get the heart rate up, whether that's, a walk on the treadmill. And I'm talking like, I'm not going to like near max heart rate. I'm going to like, just getting the heart rate somewhat elevated. So whether that's a walk on the treadmill, a little bike, 5 minutes, that's it. And then now I used to have this extensive warm up that I would do before literally every single lifting day. It would take 15 minutes to do. And now I don't do that. So I'm like, if I go in and I hit a heavy bench or heavy squat or heavy deadlift, I'll go in, I'll get the heart rate elevated a little bit, and I'll do kind of just more specific to those lifts of a warm-up. So if I'm going to heavy squat, I'll take a kettlebell and I'll goblet squat it for 15, 20 reps, 25 reps, whatever. If I'm going to bench, I'll take a band and I'll just do some like lighter band bench press, and then I'll just jump right into it. Obviously, I'm not going to jump to my max, but I'm going to jump slowly up to that
It's
weight.
so interesting. That's exactly how I transitioned. So I used to do like a bunch of different dynamic stuff before, especially like hip mobility and everything like that, or so and so. But then what I did was similar to you. It's just like what I'll do is in the car, I'll blast my heaters and my seat warmers and everything like that. I will just blast that, have my sweatshirt and everything on, even though it's freaking 85 degrees down here. I'll still do that, be sweating like a pig going into the gym, and then I'll do 5 minutes of walking, just like you said, to get your heart rate up. And then I'll pretty much just kind of dive on into it just to get like a contraction, like a mind muscle kind of contraction on. And it's just weird. I don't know. What do you think? Why do you think that's been successful for you?
Honestly, I don't know. Like, I think what I've done a lot is I've focused on my weak points or my weaknesses outside of the gym or a different time of the gym. So if I knew, like, you know what, my ankles are giving me problems in my squat, I just don't do it in the warm up. I would just do it, at the end of the day or in the morning or at a different time of day. And then that just cuts my workout time down, because like now I don't have 2 hours to work out in the gym. You know what I mean? I'm in and out 45 to 60 minutes. So I think I just prioritized it a little differently. And I just thought, like, is this doing like a ton? And then, so I just played around with it, and I was like, what if I just go in and I just warm up less? Now, I'm not saying that warming up you shouldn't do, right?
Yeah.
It's definitely specific to the person. Like, if you want to go in and you want to mobilize whatever you want to mobilize or stretch whatever you want to stretch, do it. You know what I mean? Whatever you want to do.
It goes down to like the mental aspect almost. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Like before a powerlifting meet, I would overly warm up because I was nervous and I was like, what if I can't hit this weight? You know what I mean? So I would overly warm up and I would just overthink it so much, just like you said, that mental aspect of it. But I think, it just came down to like trial and error with like, do I need to warm up this much or do I not? And then I figured I don't really, I'm just hitting a specific lift, so I'm just warming up specifically for that lift, and I just cut it shorter, right?
Yeah. So I guess then, what Jason sounds like you're saying is to like you'll read a lot of information stuff on the internet or whatever, like all these like extensive dynamic different mobilization and warm ups and all this stuff, but in reality, maybe just trying to just have confidence going into the lift, and also just finding out what you're comfortable with, instead of like trying to follow this crazy thing in order, unless you probably say if you have like problems with your hip mobility or pelvic tilt or maybe dorsiflexion, stuff like that. If you like don't, like instead of getting out of the shower and you do that stuff, maybe you do it before your lift. But I've just seen as well is maybe sometimes that makes me feel like I'm weaker because I'm like stretching everything out or whatever. And I don't like that feeling of I'm too loose. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. I just like the more of the blood flow is stuck in there. Like I have I'll do isolation movements before I even go into my compound stuff sometimes to get blood into the muscles and stuff to make it feel better. But I don't know, that's just me.
Yeah, I'm starting to think that the best way to warm up for a squat is just to squat, and the best way to warm up for a bench press is the bench press. And you're greasing the groove of the movement, so why not just have more practice with it during the warm up, right? So
yeah, exactly.
That's what I would do. And even for clients, I'm like, they ask me, how do we warm up? What do you recommend? And I'm like, well, do you have any weaknesses, or do you feel like you have to warm up a certain muscle group or joint before you work out? And they'll say yes. And then I'll say, all right, well, do that for whatever, whether it's the shoulder, the knee, the hip, the ankle, whatever. Warm it up a little bit, right? Get the joint moving. Or if they're like, well, no, not really, like, then I'll just say, all right, do a light walk on the treadmill and do some body weight squats, body weight lunges. You're solid,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just not overcomplicate it then. Huh?
Right. Exactly.
Well, I guess kind of transitioning, I guess, what do you think? This is more of like a carryover effect. What do you think, like, for example, for the big three, people try to break through or increase performance in squat, dead, and bench. What are some other exercises that you could do to try and help those lifts grow or perform better?
So to answer that question, I think I would have to, it's definitely specific, right? So if, let's take the bench press, for instance, since we're talking, or let's take the squat, because we talk a lot about the bench press. Let's take the squat, for instance. So if, let's say, this person is squatting, and there's different things to look for in the squat that can determine what this person is, their weakness is, right? Mm-hmm. So when I give assistance exercises, or when you say, I'm squatting and I want a secondary exercise, or I want accessory lifts, those accessory lifts should have a meaning, right? So if for instance, this person is squatting and they're at the bottom of a squat, and, when I say bottom, it could be full squat or it could be to 90 degrees, right? Whatever. But if they're squatting and all of a sudden their chest shoots forward down towards the floor and their hips raise up towards the ceiling, all right? This tells me two things. One, it's just a simple motor control issue. So simply have them slow down the movement, because the slower you move, the faster you learn, all right? So have them slow down the movement. Or two, their quads simply cannot extend the knee, so their hips take a lot of the grunt of the load, and that's why the hips shoot up first. So it's with this person, I would say, okay, they have weak quads. If they try motor control stuff and they still can't come up, with a relatively good back angle, then I would say let's program some quad stuff, right? A lot of the times, actually, a lot of women who squat, I don't know whether it's a mental thing with I want to work my glutes more, or I want people to see my glutes. They squat like that, right? And it's a lot of them either need to learn that motor control issue, which is use your quads or strengthen your quads. And you'll see a lot of that weakness in women, also men. But I would say, all right, let's hit quad accessory stuff. So instead of saying I'm going to squat, then I'm going to hip thrust, right? I would say I'm going to squat, then I'm going to front squat, or I'm going to elevate my heels and goblet squat, or I'm going to do leg extensions, or I'm going to do things that directly target the quads, right? And deadlift and bench press work the exact same way. There's weaknesses in that lift. To make the lift more efficient, improve those weaknesses, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, yeah, 100%. And so I'd say that common one, I'll see, is more in the thoracic region with whether you're even squatting, and then especially deadlifting with me, or more of the deadlift area would be more glutes, activation of the glutes, and then the thoracic strength, obviously.
Yeah, but that could be mobility issues as well. So there could be mobility issues, there could be strength issues, motor control issues. So it's just finding what those are, and that's going to be, again, getting with a good coach, or going with somebody who knows what that is and what to look for, like a trained eye, and then they can tell you what those weaknesses are. Bring up the weaknesses instead of building on the strengths, right? Bring them up and then build on the strengths.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of for the listeners going on or listening right now, they're well, how do I figure that out? Obviously talk to somebody who's knowledgeable at your local gym, or, ask one of us if you send video content or whatever. I don't know how you do that with your clients online. I don't work with too many powerlifters over online stuff. But I'd say that, yeah, it's not it's weird, because when I start typing on YouTube, I just wanted to see, and it's the main cause of everything is bad dorsiflexion. I'm that's not the only thing that's going on. You know what I mean? It could potentially be a problem. But starting at the hips and doing all this other things, but you need to understand the carryover exercises. Say if you're just winging it, right? You're doing squats, and then you say, okay, well, hamstring curls are a part of my legs, so if I maybe do those, that's going to help me squat better, just because it's part of my legs. Well, there's a lot more that goes into it. There's a whole entire chain, whether it's your posterior or whatever you're trying to strengthen. So yeah, I totally agree that people should probably seek out. It's just going to be repetitive during this whole thing. Is people seek out somebody to look at them, because it's super hard to diagnose it yourself, in my opinion, unless you have good video angles of what you're doing and stuff like that. But I would say, we talk about squat a little bit, then doing some quad stuff. Maybe if your hips shoot up, What if, what's your opinion on people who have really good dorsiflexion, their knees flare over their toes, their back angle is very vertical? Like, not, do you believe that's a good thing or a bad thing? And if anything, to help strengthen their squat, because it seems like they're really quad dominant, or just like your knees shoot over their toes. What would you do with them?
So I would say, like, if somebody's in this fitness industry, they should always, well, they may always get the answer of it depends, because that's usually how it is at the time. So in that case, it would be an it depends. But like, as far as what do I think of knees going past the toes, I think that it's completely safe. I think it's completely fine to happen. But again, it depends if someone has a knee issue or a knee replacement or something. Like, they should maybe not, they should maybe avoid it until they can build up the capacity to go into that excessive flexion of the knee. So I think it's, long story short, I think it's safe to do. It's completely fine. And yeah, that would be a great example of then somebody having strong quads if they're able to get into that really deep position, like a weightlifter, for instance, like an Olympic weightlifter. When they front squat, they're going to the basement. They're sinking it. Yeah.
How do your knees? Yeah.
But then if you look at them, like if you look at their build, they just have, these massive quads, right? And it's like, great, like that's exactly what they're going to get from it. So in their case is they're just going to have the opposite weakness. They might have weak hip extensors, right? So the glutes and hamstrings might be weak. The low back might be weak to extend the hips forward, because they can sink it, but they're coming up, and then halfway through the lift, their knees are only going to extend them so far. Then their hips have to shoot through, right? So if their hips just can't shoot through, then I'd say, all right, hit your basement deep squats, then go to hip thrusts or something where you can load the glutes pretty heavily, build the strength, and then again build on those weaknesses and develop a solid squat.
Yeah. And so this is good. I like this because we're gonna have like different variations and like different, because I think people will kind of start realizing, they'll take videos of themselves or look at themselves and they'll start seeing, okay, my back angle is a little more vertical. I'm gonna go back to what Jason's saying and think about that, and then I'm gonna maybe strengthen my glutes and maybe my stuff will start happening better. Or my hips are gonna shoot further up, so maybe I'm gonna go try to do some quad stuff and then my squat will get better. Another thing would be with the squat, since we're just so heavy on that right now, would be more of like different pelvic tilts, like either anterior, posterior, whatever. I think that I want to get your opinion, because most people just think of like the legs, but they don't really incorporate the core, like, your torso, midsection, all that kind of stuff. Even your shoulder mobility, you know what I mean? All that kind of stuff. For a person with, you can go into both of them and tell the weaknesses and the strengths of, like, what would you do and able to say, what would you be seeing, like lower back pain, or like, what are you seeing if you have these symptoms? Maybe your pelvis is tilted this way and maybe you should do this. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I guess first and foremost, so through, I'd say, the past 2 years, my thought process has changed a little bit. So as it probably always will. I think in the beginning of like when I started posting on social media, it was all about like, don't do this because this might happen, right? So I feel like that could be the case, but I don't want to instill fear into somebody. So if somebody has a pelvic tilt, like an anterior pelvic tilt, let's say, and they're squatting, I don't want to tell them immediately off the bat, like, hey, you have an anterior pelvic tilt, your back is going to get like effed up in 6 months if you keep squatting like this, right? Like that shouldn't be what us as trainers should tell people. And I just think, again, it's like, it depends. If somebody has low back pain and I see when they're squatting, like they are anterior pelvic, they do have an anterior pelvic tilt, throughout the whole, or when they extend the hips, their hips aren't fully coming through. And then they're like, a lot of the time, I've actually had a few clients like that. And a lot of the cueing is just like, let's get them to actually flex their glutes, flex their hamstrings at the top of the lift and kind of initiate more of a hip thrust at the top. Like immediately they'll go out of that tilt and then they're going to be like, wow, I didn't feel my back on that one. Right. Or it's just, Yeah, it's like it's not a slippery slope, but it's just how you word it. I think a lot of trainers need to be careful of. And it's like in the physical therapy world also. It's like if you have a physical therapist and you go in and you're like, oh man, you have an anterior pelvic tilt, that's why you tore your hamstring. That's why your lower back hurts. That's why your shoulder, gets dislocated. Whatever it is, right? It's like we don't necessarily know the reason why. And they've done studies, and there was an MRI thing that went around that showed that there was like 30% of people how old are you?
22.
22. Okay. So yeah, ages like in our 20s, I don't remember the exact age, but they actually had like a discogenic issue. So whether that's bulging disc, herniated disc, without any pain. So these people were walking around with, a disc herniation, and they're like, I don't have any pain, or they didn't know. And then all of a sudden though, what's funny about the brain is that they're going to be like, now I know that I have a herniated disc. Now I'm going to feel all this back pain. Right. But like, that's what
situation happened with hormonal stuff with testosterone levels.
Yeah.
Guys walk around like, I'm fine, I'm cool. And then they get their blood work back and it's like 150 total tests. And they're like, and then it just hits them and they're like, now I feel like I'm tired. I'm like, okay.
Tired. I don't have energy, like all this stuff. It's just, it's such a, I don't know. It's crazy. And I feel like, so yeah, back to the point is like, the way that I look at the squat is I'm just looking for efficiency, right? What's going to create the best efficiency for this person doing this lift, right? So person A and person B might not have the exact same squat. They can have two different squats and be super efficient, each of them, right? Based on their limb lengths, their injuries, whatever it is, they can have two different squats. So you have to make the squat efficient for each individual. So did that answer your question on anterior pelvic tilt? I don't know where.
Yeah. It comes back to, it depends, obviously. But I guess I would say that if somebody knew they had like a butt wink, right? We'll just call it that so people actually know what the hell we're talking about. Call it a butt wink. To maybe potentially help that butt wink, where would you start? Maybe with either you can start with the form or start with the accessory lifts to try and strengthen, say, like your hamstrings or your, stuff like that. Like, would you even dive into that, or would you just do something different? Is what I'm saying.
So first off, and I'd love to hear your input on this too, but I love a good friendly debate if you want to go about that. But
yeah, like you're way more versed in this field with this stuff, but yeah, I'll try to keep up.
So first and foremost, for the people that are listening and maybe don't know what a butt wink is, a butt wink is actually when your femur, so your big bone in your thigh right there, has no more room to rotate in the hip, and your hips actually rotate down. So it doesn't actually have a lot to do with any musculature, so hamstrings or quads or hip flexors or anything like that. It's just when you're squatting and there's no more room for your femur to go back in your hip, so your hip actually just compensates and it just tucks under, right? So a butt wink is when your hips tilt. So in that case, there are a few things that you can do. A lot of butt winks sometimes occurs with people with longer limbs. I would say let's trial and error. Like, let's be like, okay, does this work? Nope. Try this. If this worked, nope. Try that. Right. So with a butt wink, for instance, I would try taking their stance width out a little bit. Also toe out a little bit. Also, you can try elevated heels. So elevated heels will give the impression of more range for your hip to actually go, or for your femur to actually go. So surprisingly, I know that might not be the answer you want to hear, but it's not going to have a lot to do with musculature.
No, I totally agree with like starting with the mechanical side of things like that. Right. And then seeing like I'll go into the musculature just in case. Yeah. Like for example, like I'm saying, like the hamstrings or like the core and stuff like that. That's a common thing people, I'm guessing you're debating with people about, and I totally understand like how the ball and socket is, and like pushed back and rotating a certain way. It totally makes sense to me for sure, and I would agree that extra rotating and elevating your heels a little bit for the range of motion, that's where I would start as well, for sure. And I don't know if you would even transition then to doing, if it still doesn't work, doing some sort of mobility exercise with a band or something like that to then further try and increase that range of motion before even trying, just like, for instance, like a last resort is trying the musculature route of like strengthening it all. Sounds like you won't even touch that, huh?
No, I mean, it's just, yeah, it's like, I think in the past, I would have. Like, I would have been like, all right, let's lay on a foam roller. Let's try and do this, that on your hip flexion quad, right? But the more you, like, are around it and just live in it a little more, it's like, do you act like, I don't know. It's so hard to explain. And
I feel like it's more now too, if people think about, like, it's all these like videos of stretching and doing all this stuff and like that, but there's more new research and stuff. There's more you probably know about than me, obviously, but just like it comes back to like motor control more than anything, I feel like.
Yeah. And like, in order to influence tissue or like muscle like that, the best thing you can do is to actually like load it, right? So if you're trying to do an ankle dorsiflexion mobilization, like instead of stretching in a position that your ankle is dorsiflex, like try actually getting in that position, throwing a plate on your knee and letting the plate load into the dorsiflexion, right? So that's one of the biggest things I learned on my FRC, or my functional range conditioning certification, was they're loading at these end ranges. They're doing isometric loads at end ranges, and that's what develops that strength and control at the end range, right? It's not pulling the muscle to the end and holding it there and feeling a stretch and feeling good. It's actually working for it, right?
You're resisting it. It's the isometric contraction rather than just like letting it pull you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And again, like, I'm not saying stretching is bad or massage is bad. Like, I have really good friends who are massage therapists, and I totally support, like, I'm totally with them. Like, it's just, there's a time and a place for anything, right? And it's just using those tools in those specific times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right? I like fascia and these kind of stuff, but I totally agree that exactly what you're saying, the mechanical side of things is
right.
Yeah.
And I used to be like, 6 years ago, I would be like, all right, okay, your quad's tight, your hamstring's tight. Immediately I'm like, all right, where's the foam roller, right? Jump on that foam roller. The harder, the better, right? Like the harder the foam roller, the better, whatever, sit on a PVC pipe, right? But now I'm like, I don't even remember the last time I told any of my clients to even get a foam roller or foam roll this out, right? Mm-hmm. There are specific cases though, like I would say, go to a massage therapist that knows their stuff versus you foam rolling that out yourself, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, that was good. No, I like that. I like that a lot because there's always, and people listening, they'll understand too. Like, well, they should understand now that the research and like the opinions are always transforming. It's not like the same the last 50, 60, whatever years. It's constantly evolving. I mean, like back then, static stretching was like the glory, or like it was like awesome for you, right? And then now it's looked at as like terrible for you or whatever, right? So it's like it'll transform over time. And so I like that though, like the more mechanical and just like really looking at how stuff's gliding and how stuff is rotating. I mean, all of the mechanical, the biomechanical, that's what I'm really into because I have a physics and engineering background. So yeah, no, I agree with that. And I'm going to start trying to maybe see that rather than doing any sort of accessory work for those powerlifting stuff. Except for one thing I will do though is like, it seems to be a big thing, especially with like deadlifting. Maybe increasing your like traditional, I don't know how you feel about this. Increasing your traditional is to like doing sumo style deadlifts for more glute activation, stuff like that. Seems to just carry over hugely. And front squats, you know what I mean? Like hugely into the deadlifts for some reason.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of thinking, well, I do think that squatting will actually carry over a ton to the deadlift. And yeah, doing different variations will always have some sort of carryover. But yeah, like myself, I'm a sumo deadlifter. I will throw in conventional deadlifts. I mean, just for some sort of carryover, hitting the different variations, the different angles, the different musculature. There definitely is carryover for sure.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess, and that's kind of like a lot of the stuff we just covered. But I would say that some added stuff I would ask you is more on the recovery side of things for powerlifting, strength training, because it's definitely going to be different than bodybuilding, which I'm more versed in my realm of things, obviously. But essentially, it's because you're more of like neuro adaptations and central nervous system stimulation, all that kind of stuff. What would you say about the recovery, like between hitting those certain big lifts? I mean, what would you say? We'll start there, then I'm going to ask a couple more. Yeah.
So like as far as after one training session, after like frequency of lifts.
Yeah, more of like a frequency over like, and then I know you can go into like how your volume increases or whatever you like to do through like a linear or a undulating. I don't know how you do it, but more of just like your frequency throughout the week. What have you seen work well for you in terms of recovering the best? Obviously, it's going to say it depends on the individual, but what do you like to like the ballpark?
So basically the first question I would ask, and the question I would ask myself, is how many times am I currently doing each lift? All right. So if I'm only squatting one time a week, I'm gonna, and let's say I'm not seeing as much progress, or I would like to increase that frequency, then I would go to 2 times a week, right? Simple as that, right? And it can literally be, now just think logically here. It's like if I squat on Monday, and there are like numerous ways you can go about this, but just the basic part is if I squat on Monday, and I'm, like if you're squatting and you're powerlifting, you're going to be throwing up some good amount of weight, right? Like, and your muscles, your body's going to get fatigued. So if I'm squatting on Monday, I want to allow a sufficient amount of rest time before I go back into it again. All right. So typically, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days after your first initial squat session, right? However, on the flip side of that, the other way to look at it is, let's say this person is squatting 3 days a week. This would be for a pretty advanced lifter. Let's say they're squatting 3 days a week and they need to up their frequency to 4 days a week. Then I would say you need to look at their programming and you need to adjust their volume and intensity, right, for each of those squat days. So you can squat 4 days a week, 5 days a week, 6 days a week. There's even a program called Squat Every Day.
Mike Rashid.
Yeah, exactly, right?
yeah.
They're squatting every day, right? I'm sure they're taking into account some recovery stuff, but they're doing it in terms of, let's say Monday you're squatting at a certain volume, certain intensity. Let's say it's a higher, let's like 4x8, right? Let's say that's gonna wreck you, right? That's gonna really take it out of you. The next day or the day after, I would shoot for more of a power day, so more of a lighter load, moving the weight at max velocity, and where it doesn't fatigue you as bad as like your 4x8 day, your hypertrophy day, right? So I would split the volume between those 4 days, 5 days, whatever, or just have sufficient amount of rest days in between. So that's how recovery would work as far as frequency goes.
I want to like pick out something in there is very interesting of the word power.
Yeah.
You said, I love this debate that we had in CSCS stuff back in college. What is the definition of power? And so your definition would be more in the sense of a lighter load, higher velocity then, correct?
Well, I would say it would be moving away from point A from point B as quickly as possible.
Okay. Yeah, because powerlifting is going to be the highest load, right?
Right.
Doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, whatever. Like it's more of like almost like a CrossFit kind of deal. Like obviously you can manipulate. There's 2 variables. There's the load and then the velocity, which just means speed in that direction or whatever. But yeah, I just want to bring that up just to see your viewpoint on that. But so when he says power, like you said, it's going to be a lighter load at a faster velocity is what you're saying on that maybe second.
Right. So like, 30 to 50%. A lot of just so it's 30 to 50% for like, lower repetitions. So you're moving that 30 to 50% of your 1 rep max for 3 reps, and that's 3 efficient reps. So I'm like, not only does it give you enough to practice because the load is lighter, but I think you are in a sense training the ability to move that away from point A to point B quickly, right?
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Cool. So then
that's central nervous system stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So then, yeah, I guess the answer to that would be like, obviously it depends, but as you progress in experience level, to not be afraid. Like, it comes back to the mental thing, right? Like, people will be afraid, oh, like if I'm squatting 4 days a week, that's so much. But you got to like take a step back and like look at how much total volume, like what's the load on those days? Like, how are you going through it? And if you're like, if you try and like you're squatting 3 days a week, you bump it up to 4 and you change some stuff within that, and you're still recovering, then have at it. Like, why not, right?
Yeah, for sure, 100%. And that's where I think this is where having a good coach comes in handy, because they're going to know, all right, this person squatting a heavier load this day, maybe they should go a little bit lighter the next day, and so forth. They're going to be a lot better at judging and programming your frequencies than Google will, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I guess a couple last things I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about is more on switching totally left field, is that supplementation that you use for stimulating central nervous system, and like how you kind of program that to help your lifts. Do you use any sort of caffeine or any sort of stimulant?
Sure, yeah. I'm a huge fan of
Same
caffeine.
here.
So yeah, that's basically my take on supplements. Like, I'm a super basic dude. Like, I don't like to get into the complexity of things. If a client asks me, well, me first, I'll say I use caffeine, I use whey protein, and off the top of my head, that is it. So I'm a huge fan of caffeine, only because caffeine is shown to increase your performance, right?
That's why, yeah, exactly. People like talk shit about it all the time. Like, bro, like,
no way.
Go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
Take 300 milligrams of caffeine and then come back and talk to me, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, and then for my clients, right? You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, dude, that's my pre-workout, 300 milligrams. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So much, it's gonna be so hard on your heart. I'm like, hey, if you're an idiot, you abuse the stuff, then yeah, it's just like anything else in the world. It's
exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's great. And then for my clients, like the same thing. I'm like, I had someone recently start up with me for nutrition, and they're like, what sort of supplements can I take? And I say, well, what are you taking now? And they'll say, I'm not taking anything now. Then I'll say, all right, well, sounds great. Like,
yeah,
there you go. Like, take caffeine if you want to increase your performance. Take whey protein if you can't get in enough protein. And like, yeah, sure, fish oils are great. Creatine. I forgot to mention creatine. The creatine's actually in my pre-workout, so that's just low-key snuck in there. Yeah. So I do take creatine, caffeine, and whey protein, because creatine is the longest studied supplement out there, and there are benefits to it.
Yeah, especially for because we won't dive into the properties and stuff of creatine, but yeah, those are definitely, I would agree, those top 3 in and fish oil, that's definitely in there for me too, for inflammation purposes and all that shit. But yeah, I'd say that if there's any supplementation at all, to do that. And I guess for that caffeine though, if we just stay on caffeine, obviously like you're going to increase their performance. I see a huge increase, but would you, when people start using that, and they start seeing their PRs go up or whatever, a certain little lifts go up, when do you like to cut it back, if any like back at all?
From caffeine?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I mean, if they want to keep taking it, and not even like taking it. It's like, if you want to drink coffee every day, cool, drink coffee every day. Like I have some sort of caffeine in me every single day. Yeah. Whether that's coffee, whether that's pre-workout, whatever. Yeah,
exactly. And I'd say that like, I'm the same way, dude. Shit, like I gotta. It's just like it's so funny how there's different like addicting things, and people don't think about caffeine being addictive, but it's semi. Like I definitely can tell. But yeah, I would say like the only time I see with my clients, like bodybuilding and people are trying to get stronger, like strength training stuff, would be to like. It seems to be like it aligns almost when they're at a point in time where their numbers start dropping a little bit and they need a deload or something like that. And what's that?
Sorry. And that would be the only case, would be to desensitize a little bit from caffeine. Let's say in powerlifting, someone's coming up to a meet. I would say, all right, you've been taking caffeine, maybe cut it 2 weeks out from a meet, because once you take it again after you desensitize, boom, it's gonna hit you like you have never taken caffeine before. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's exactly what I like to do. And usually, for some reason, it just seems to perfectly align with like the actual like the training deload that you need as well or whatever that I'll have every whatever how many weeks or whatever if they need it. There's some people I just did a podcast that like project and like they plan for the deload. I don't really plan for it as much. I kind of just like push it until I feel like I need to. That's just how I personally like to do it. I do that with caffeine as well. And so yeah. So if people like in that mode, because I'm gonna pull back. I don't know how much volume you pull back on your deloads, whatever, 40% or more or less or whatever. But I would pull back like the same amount on the caffeine because you're not going to be doing as much and you're already going to be doing a less amount anyway. So that's going to also like you said, desensitize and allow for when you get back on, it's going to feel amazing again. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. I even would recommend, just let's say they need a caffeine fix and they drink coffee, just get decaf. Like I had a client actually tell me, he's like, you know what, I've been drinking this coffee, like feeling good. And then all of a sudden I looked at the bag and it said it was decaf, right? So this guy thought he was drinking. Yeah, it's like a total placebo thing. He's like, he's drinking decaf coffee and he still feels that he's getting the same energy that with a normal cup of coffee. So yeah, like just cut it back to decaf or secretly tell the barista, hey, give me decaf, but don't tell me. You know what I mean? Whatever would work.
Whatever works. You'd be surprised with the placebo stuff in these studies too. Shit.
Yeah, exactly.
But well, all right, brother. Well, yeah. Let's we'll wrap it up a little bit here. But I think that was a lot of great info of like, especially in that squatting stuff. Kind of like diagnosing a little bit, starting with the mechanics, going through and like not overthinking things and making it too complicated, obviously. And then working your way through to like blasters and plateaus, some variation stuff. All great stuff that I think that people will definitely benefit from. But I guess at the end of the day, would you agree that just don't make it super complicated? Like just add. Exactly. Holy cow. Yeah. Sorry. The plug. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
It's echoing now. But anyway, to not make it super complicated, but to just add slight volume and to do simple adjustments, find somebody in the gym that can help you that's knowledgeable, and then just go from there.
Yeah, keep it basic.
Cool. Well, what I'm going to do is put up Jason's, all his info in the description stuff, his IG, his email. If you have any questions for him in this realm of things, definitely contact him. If you have any questions for me as well, I'll put my IG and my email in there. But other than that, my man, thank you so much for hopping on here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we'll have to do it again. I like your background in the biomechanical stuff. I do have some other questions for you, so we'll have to do it again, brother.
Sounds good.
All right, man. But until next time, see you guys.